Oh, hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on digital technology in Indonesia, brought to you today by Asialink Business in partnership with Investment New South Wales, part of the New South Wales government. I want to extend a very warm welcome to everyone joining this session today. I know we have a really diverse range of attendees across VC, accelerators, tech companies, government advisory firms, legal firms, all sorts of people who are involved in all sorts of elements of the tech ecosystem, both in Australia and in Indonesia. So a very warm welcome to all of you. I want to begin this session by acknowledging that I'm joining you on the lands of the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nation. And I extend my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And indeed, I extend my respects and greetings to any Indigenous people that might be joining the session with us today. For those who don't know me, my name is Robert Law. I'm the Director of Advisory and Insights at Asialink Business. Asialink Business is all about building an Asia-capable workforce. We do this by upskilling Australian business leaders and the companies themselves to engage in the region. And in the Advisory and Insights team, we work with businesses providing advice around market entry strategy and strategy advice for how to navigate the challenges in Asia. I'm very pleased that we can bring you this webinar with Investment New South Wales, and we'll get into a little bit more detail later on about their presence in Indonesia and how they might be able to help you and your business as well. Just before we jump into proceedings, there are a couple of small housekeeping things to go through. Just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and a video of this will be made available at a later stage on YouTube for you to access. And we do have the Q&A function there. So if you do have questions as we get into the panel discussion, please enter those in. In terms of how today's session will run, we're going to start off with a view from the ground by Yonathan Wijaya. He is the New South Wales Government Trade and Investment Representative in Jakarta. From there, we're going to transition into a panel discussion, and we've got some really great representatives joining you across venture capital, across media, and also an Australian businesswoman who's done the hard yards herself and really been quite successful in the Indonesian market. So we'll get into those presently. But first of all, I'm very pleased to welcome Yonathan. He is the Trade and Investment Director in Jakarta, and a very well-known person who gives great assistance to New South Wales businesses that are interested in the Indonesian market. And really glad to have you with us here today, Yonathan. I thought it'd be great to start with a bit of a view from the ground. What are you seeing in terms of the Indonesian tech industry? Obviously, we've seen a lot of big Indonesian tech unicorns emerge in recent years, and that was really punctuated just a couple of weeks ago with GoTo going public, listing on the Jakarta Stock Exchange. So there's certainly a lot of excitement and energy about the market. What are the top trends and things that you think people should know?
Thank you, Rob, and thanks everyone for coming in and tuning into this session. Absolutely a pleasure to be here as well. I would like to also thank my fellow panelists who has also spared their time to be here. Russo, Francisco, and also Nadine. Thank you so much for being here with us. So what I would like to share with you, as Robert mentioned, is an overview of the market itself. Of course, this sector is changing as we speak. It is very dynamic, and I would like to share some of the views that some of the overview that I have right now. Of course, when you are in the market, there will be a lot of validation that you will need to do. There will be lots of different experience that, of course, our my fellow panelists here will share also with you about the market, about their experience. So really excited to be able to discuss this with them. So I would like to just start with an overview of a relationship between New South Wales and Indonesia in general. So New South Wales and Indonesia, we have two ways good trade of 2.6 billion, good export of about 1.3 billion, and surprisingly, it grows about 23.8% in the last year. So during the pandemic, we are actually exporting more to Indonesia. And some of the statistics I would like to highlight as well. 42% of Indonesian visitors to Australia come to New South Wales, and we also represent 54% of the Indonesian students enrollment. We also have an MOU with Jakarta Capital City. It is a sister state MOU that has been long-standing, and we would like to renew that. And of course, the tech sector is one of the area that we would like to work more deeply with Jakarta. Probably some of you listened to our session with Jakarta government about a few months ago. It was in December. And some of the area that were identified, including learning management system for the government officials, IoT for environmental management, flood management, are also identified as well as opportunities for the Jakarta government. Next slide, please. So yeah, these are the three sectors that investment New South Wales. So we are the trade and investment agency of New South Wales government. We have now an office in Jakarta together with Austrade in the Australian embassy. These are the three sectors that we are looking at as priority: agribusiness and food, tech sector, of course. That's what we are covering today, and also education and VAT. In Indonesia itself, there are two representatives, myself as trade and investment director, and I have my associate director, Menanda, focusing more on international education. Of course, we have our presence as well in Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, which is coming soon in 2022 or 2023. Next slide, please. So we'll just give an overview of the key features of the market. Some of you probably have heard about this as well. We have 270 million people, fourth most populous country in the world, and more than 50% of the population are below 30 years old. Sorry, and more than 70% are at productive age, so 15 to 64. And smartphones are the key platform. So 96% of internet users actually accessing internet from their handheld device. And the digital economy itself, we have heard probably about the growth and the size, set to grow about 133 billion US dollars by 2025. It has grown about 49% per annum since 2015. And between Indonesia and Australia, we have IACPA agreement signed, which hoped to accelerate the trade between two countries, more privileged treatment, more duties and barriers to be removed. It is now in the implementation phase, actually. But along with that, there are certain challenges that we have to acknowledge. In this sector especially, we have shortage of digital talent. We'll talk about this later. Nadine probably have some insights about it, but it is here and it is foreseen to be a gap that will exist in the several years to come due to the education not focusing in the earlier years. And we also have changing regulations. It's a new sector, it's a dynamic sector. The government is still figuring out which framework to put, which area they would like to regulate, which area they would like to give more freedom. So regulations are changing from time to time, and we have to be updated about this. And outside urban centers like Jakarta, infrastructure and connectivity is still developing. So connectivity in terms of internet and also infrastructure for logistics is still something that is still developing, but there are a lot of solutions being built around this. Logistics startup are popping up to answer these needs. And also there is uneven and financial digital literacy between the urban centers and also the remote areas. So something that the government, the President Joko is trying to address, but it is here, and that is to be acknowledged as well when you are talking about starting a business in Indonesia. And some sectors I would say are domestic oriented, and it is also dominated by domestic players. There are a lot of them that already exist and covers quite strongly in terms of the market share. Next slide, please. So these are the sectors and the players, the domestic players that I mentioned. Some of them have reached the status of unicorn, decacorn, and they command quite strong market share. I would say in some sectors, probably up to 80 to 90 of the market share are controlled by these players. Ride-hailing, food delivery, we have the GoTo Group, Gojek, and also Grab, regional player. E-commerce, we have, of course, Tokopedia, part of the GoTo Group as well, that just went IPO. Shopee, regional players, Blibli and Bukalapak, just domestic players as well. Health, we have Halodoc and HaloDokter. Education, we have Ruang Guru and Zenius. Logistic, we have JNT Express, Unicorn as well, actually. Antaraja, Shipper, new player. Travel or experience, we have Traveloka, Ticket.com. Next slide. Payments, e-money, OVO, GoPay, part of GoTo Group. Link Aja, which is part of a network of state-owned enterprise as well. We have Dana, Sendit. Sendit focus more on B2B and money transfer. They are a unicorn, actually, probably less heard about. Digital bank, we have Genius, Jago, Bank Commerce, retail investment, something up and coming, Bareksa, Bibit, Ajaib, which is a unicorn as well. And there are also quite a few crypto portal popping up. It's quite an interesting and new sector, but also very dynamic in Indonesia. So what I would like to show here, showing the logo and the different colors and the many players, is that how developed the sector is, but there's also competition and how diverse the sector is. So this is something that probably you want to keep in mind when you are entering the sectors, that the players are here, especially the domestic ones, and some of them has managed to gain quite big valuation. Next slide. These are the biggest ones, the bigger ones actually in terms of the valuation. We have GoTo, JNT, Bukalapak, Traveloka, OVO, Online Pajak, Ajaib, Sendit. Well, valuation is sometimes that we take with a bit of pinch of salt, I would say. But what I would like to show here is the top biggest startups. Of course, with the changing dynamics outside Indonesia as well, this valuation is something that need some reviewing. We'll talk more about this later on in the discussion. But what I would like to show is the biggest players right now in Indonesia. Next slide. So, in terms of you have all the players in terms of the startups, but when you are entering these sectors, e-commerce, ride-hailing, it could be quite difficult when you are a new player and you already have the strong, big, dominant players in the sector. But what I would like to sort of overview here are the areas that are growing and being sort of the infrastructure and the different services that a lot of companies in Indonesia are using, and they are actually growing in terms of the market itself. Let's start with SaaS. is relatively new, but it's not very new. It is already here alongside the growth of internet penetration. There's need of cost efficiency, cloud storage as well. Lots of people needs different softwares for their effort to go digital. So the market expected to grow at annualized rate of 31.9%. And estimated to reach $400 million in 2023 from $100 million in 2018. So we'll hear from Emma later about her experience in entering this market. Although the pie is big, but of course it comes with challenges, as I mentioned. Cybersecurity, Indonesia has been particularly prone to cyber attacks. Probably you've heard about this as well. So if I could give an estimate, in 2018 there were 232 million cyber attacks in Indonesia, and Indonesia is one of the world's most targeted countries. So over the past 5 years, the private sector and public sector realized this. There's more and more need for cybersecurity infrastructure. In 2018, Indonesia established its cybersecurity agency, BSSN, and Australia and Indonesia, we have a cooperation in cybersecurity, a G2G agreement. And from day to day, you will hear in social media, cybersecurity, data leakage, even personal data is something that keeps happening, and there's a big need for cybersecurity actually in Indonesia. Next slide, please. Mobility as well, together with pandemic, people are working remotely. People need the support of being able to do that with cloud system and alongside. And in terms of the mobile user itself, Indonesia is the 5th largest market for mobile subscribers with 355 million users. So you can imagine there are 270 million population, but number of subscribers are more than that. So one person could have more than one mobile subscription. AI, data analytics. So the appetite for enterprise and SME to use this to improve their operational efficiency. Again, the startups as well, the ones that you see that I mentioned before this, are using this to better adjust the operation, sometimes to see which area are growing for them, also to better meet their customers' needs. So it is a growing area for Indonesia. Next. IoT, so not very much seen, I would say. We'll hear from the panelists also later whether this is an area. The value is expected to reach $30 billion by 2022. We'll see. This is a contribution of several components: content application, platforms, IoT devices, networks, and gateways. So an area that is that commands quite a big market size as well in Indonesia. Next slide. These are the area that is probably quite related to digital itself, but also something that is around tech. But I would like to just cover this very quickly for you. For some of you might be interested as well. Healthcare services training is an area that is still needed for Indonesia. Sometimes it is quite specific. We've seen big hospitals in Indonesia requesting training for example, pain management. So that is very, very specific. Diagnostic devices technology, health solutions in terms of telemedicine is growing as well. Given the big geographical landscape of Indonesia. Next slide. Smart city and clean tech. We're talking about Jakarta. I mentioned just now, there's an increasing use of technology in terms of managing the cities, of course, in transportation as well. And we're talking to the transport integration in terms of the ticketing, how to do data analytics for them. Electric vehicle is something that is growing very, very quickly. In Indonesia, it is growing interest, and we are foreseeing big growth in the future as the industry is taking off. Waste management, big waste problem in Jakarta, in Indonesia in general. We are the second biggest plastic polluter in the world. water management, something that we still need to figure out. Again, probably with the help of IoT as well, renewable energy with the net zero aim of Indonesia and the G20 promise as well. There's a need for smart grid to manage the different load, the unreliability of renewable energy at times. So that area is something to explore. Next slide. So what I could say in terms of the tips when you're entering Indonesia, we'll hear more about this. It is sometimes mentioned as a challenging market. So you could always leverage on our help, Investment New South Wales, and also the bilateral business chambers that we're working with, the IBC, Australia-Indonesia Business Council, and also its counterparts, Indonesia-Australia Business Council. We are working together to, of course, help you in this market. I think Australia-Indonesia Business Council is planning a follow-up event to this to discuss more about what they can do, what we can do together to help your businesses. And in Indonesia, relationships are key. So establishing this relationship is the first step, is the foundation for to grow your business partner, stakeholder here. Because of the changing regulation, you can't always keep up with that. But your partner here will have that better view from the ground, relationship with the government as well, and be present. Again, responding to the dynamic market, trying to refine your strategy, changing your strategy when necessary, and trying to enter the market remotely could be difficult, or I would say definitely is difficult. And of course, be open to partnership and changing the product, adapting to the market needs. That is always very, very dynamic. Next. And these are the some of the initiatives, some of the help that we provide. We have export advisors, 12 of them around in New South Wales to help you onshore, and offshore you have myself and the New South Wales representative office here. We have export assistance grant program up to 10,000 reimbursement for marketing and export development. And also we have the Going Global Export program, which is a tailored program to help a cohort of potential exporters to enter the market. Normally it will last about 6 months, and we hope to launch a tech Going Global program in July or August this year. So watch this space. You have the link there to check when we are launching the programs. Currently, we are launching. We have 2 programs running in agri-food beverage and also in EdTech actually, which is managed by my associate director in international education. So yeah, looking forward to helping you the market, and of course to discuss with the panelists here as well. Back to you, Rob. Thank you.
Well, fantastic, Yonathan. I was taking a lot of notes during that, and there's a few topics that we'll definitely pick up in the panel discussion, particularly around skills, connectivity across the archipelago, crypto as well, and also where the gaps and opportunities are. But I thought I might take the opportunity to ask you, for people in the audience who might be curious, what's the sort of COVID situation at the moment in terms of doing business, and are people able to visit the market right now?
Yeah, so the situation in Indonesia is getting much better. So I would say in big cities like Jakarta, it is already resembling normal. I would say people are working in the office. The traffic jam is back, so that's a good sign in a way for the economy. People can also visit the market easily. You don't have to do quarantine. You don't have to do a PCR test when you land in Indonesia. So entry is quite easy. So on that sense, I've been getting quite a number of requests from New South Wales companies who are looking forward to visit. I think after Eid, because we will have the Eid holiday next week, and then the following week we'll have 2 or 3 visits to start at least.
Fabulous. Thanks for that update from the ground. I'd now like to bring our panel in for the discussion. We have three great panelists joining us. They are Francisco Widjojo, who is managing partner at Arkblu Capital, Russo, who is CEO and founder of Digivizer, a Australian company that's having some good success in Indonesia, and Nadine Freischlad, who is deputy editor for the Ken. And if you haven't checked out the Ken, go and sign up. It's got all your information around Southeast Asian tech, so a really great publication. But I want to start with you, Francisco. You're managing partner at Arkblu, which is an investment firm focused on alternate asset classes. You have experience as a corporate lawyer, and now you're leading venture capital strategy and work to look at the Indonesian market. And I think Arkblu is really at the forefront in terms of bridging the ecosystems between Australia and Indonesia. I know you've got a portfolio of businesses that you're invested in Indonesia. What makes the market so attractive, and particularly when it comes to that emerging middle class, how does Indonesia stack up compared to other Southeast Asian or Asian markets that you might look at?
Yeah, sure, Rob. Yeah, thanks for the question, and it's a great starter as well. And I think I'll just point to the numbers. Indonesia, at the end of the day, just like Yonathan said, it's a country with 270 million, 75 million people. In terms of micro SMEs, in Australia we talk about SMEs. In Indonesia we talk about micro SMEs. The number is around 60 million. So just by those figures alone, it's just a very fascinating market. And what we're seeing as well is, again, leveraging what Yonathan said, a lot of the very first tech companies, they were your go-to, so your Gojek, your Tokopedia, your Traveloka, which was the B2C market. What we're seeing now is, and 80% of our portfolio actually, it's those businesses or those tech startups are actually helping the micro SMEs digitizing their operations, digitizing their information, allowing them to better use information for their decision making. So yeah, I mean, just by the numbers alone, it's just such a fascinating market. You can talk about things such as mobile first. Obviously in Australia, we went from the desktop to the laptop to the mobile, whereas in Indonesia, for the very first time, it was people accessing the internet through the mobile. In addition to that, we've recently delved into Web3 and cryptocurrencies. So it's a very fascinating, one very interesting statistic is the fact that in Indonesia, the trading volume of cryptocurrencies, retail cryptocurrency, is actually larger than the volume of traditional securities trading on the stock market. So again, Indonesia is crypto native. To use some terminology in the crypto world, there's a lot of degens in Indonesia because of that. So just these very nuanced characteristics, it makes it a very interesting market.
I think that's a really interesting point you make around crypto, Francisco, and I'd love to hear you expand a little bit more on what you see as the emerging trends in the market, particularly in light of, I think, what Yonathan presented to us. It does look like some parts of the digital economy have some established players. So where might there be emerging opportunities that businesses should be aware of?
Yeah, sure, Rob. Look, I can talk about a lot, but I'll talk about one particular instance, and it will be a cryptocurrency example. And I think this is quite interesting because it's beginning to be talked about a lot now, but it's something that really emerged only during the pandemic, and it's what's called the play to earn business model. So basically, in Southeast Asia, we've got this new business model where a lot of people, there's games, NFT games, non-fungible token games. And essentially what is happening is we have this entire middle class where they're playing games such as Axie Infinity, which is a game that was created by a Vietnamese game developer called Sky Mavis. They're backed by Andreessen Horowitz from Silicon Valley. And essentially it's where players, during the pandemic, there's a lot of wage earners, so people who would earn a living day to day, and their options are they can be a Gojek driver, or a Grab driver, or a driver for Cepat, for example, Or what they could do, which is what a lot of the gaming developers push, is you can essentially make money using by playing games. And essentially these, the in-game cryptocurrency can then be off-ramped into fiat currency, such as Indonesian rupiah. And essentially what the play-to-earn business model is, it's where institutional investors as well as professional investors, they get together and they raise a fund, and instead of buying a fund into startups, say, they end up buying NFT gaming assets and renting it out to players. Essentially, Axie Infinity is a game where, imagine it's like you need these three kind of cute little Pokemon things. They're called Axies, and they're quite expensive. So last time our team checked, they're about $250 per Axie. You need 3 of them. And basically what these players are doing is they're going out to professional guilds, and essentially these guilds are renting out these Axies to players, and they split the profits 70-30. So yeah, and this is made possible because, number one, a lot of Indonesians are very crypto native. Number two, gaming is very popular in Indonesia, especially leisurely gaming. And number three, Indonesia is a very community-centric economy. So yeah, like we're seeing a lot of business models being created out of the play-to-earn business model. And I think that's super interesting in Indonesia.
It's really fascinating to hear about some of these innovations and the games and NFTs and so forth. Does that mean that sort of more quote unquote traditional areas of tech like e-commerce, payments, and so forth? Do you think there's not as much opportunity there?
No, definitely not. There's definitely still opportunities within those spaces. I think the only caveat I would say to that is we've got our large, say, e-commerce players. So you've got your Tokopedia, you've got your Bukalapak, you've got your Blibli. A lot of the businesses that are being created now, it's not essentially to replace those businesses, but it's essentially businesses that are leveraging the technology or the infrastructure in order to take advantage of them. So for example, the direct-to-consumer business model. So there's a lot of direct-to-consumer brands that are being created, both at the aggregator level as well as the individual level. And essentially these businesses, because they're creating their brands, it might be a fashion brand or a cosmetics brand or a food brand, because there is now that e-commerce infrastructure, they're able to sell and access customers a lot more easily. They can use the discounts, for example, that Tokopedia are offering. They can use the existing infrastructure of logistics, such as a Secepat or Antaraja. So because these infrastructure pillars are already there, it means that businesses can build things on top of these enabling infrastructure. So it's a kind of like, again, to use a crypto example, you've got your layer one technologies such as your Bitcoin, and then you've got your additional layers that are being built on top of that. So this is what's happening into Indonesia. So we've got your existing very fundamental layer of, say, e-commerce, of, say, Gojek, and things are being built on top of that, that is leveraging things that are beneath. So yeah, that's what we see within the space.
Fantastic, Francisco. And look, I did want to take the opportunity to ask you, the venture capital world can sometimes seem a bit opaque to some people, I think. If you're a tech business, at what stage should you be approaching a venture capital fund like yourself? And what do you look at when you assess opportunities?
Yeah, sure. In terms of when you should start approaching a fund manager or any investor, the quick answer is as soon as possible, because at the end of the day, unlike what you see on Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, investors, they don't make a decision after a 5-minute conversation, although some investors like to think that they do and that they're very lucky, but that's not what happens. Relationships are built over months, if not years. So as soon as you have an MVP, or even if you have some sort of idea, it's always good to build that relationship as soon as possible. And in terms of what we look at, there's many different frameworks, but the one that we look at is we look at founder, market or industry, and then product, and we look at them in that order. So founder at the end of the day is the most important. By founder, we talk about domain expertise. What did you do before? What are your skills? Why are you solving this particular type of business problem? And why should we invest in you as opposed to another founder that is solving this problem? And 2, market. So how big is your market essentially? Is it a growing market? What are the structural issues with that market? And number 3, product. At the end of the day, it's always better to have a good founder that has a crappy product as opposed to a good product but a crappy founder. And in terms of industry, if your product is not the best, but you're operating in the same industry, you can always pivot your product or your business. So because of that, we look at things in that order. So again, very simply, founder, industry or market, and then product.
That's fantastic. Thank you for helping to demystify the VC world for us. Now, we've got Nadine and Emma both there, and I want to bring them into the conversation, but I do want to start with you, Nadine. So, you know, you are the deputy editor of the Ken Southeast Asia, a really great website publication that people should check out, and a really broad range of experience in the journalism world, and you've been published quite broadly in a number of outlets. Really keen, and you're also in Jakarta, so really keen to hear your perspectives on the trends that Yonathan and Francisco have outlined. Does that match with what you're seeing, and what else would you add?
Thanks. Thanks, first of all, for having me join here, and also for your praise for what we do at the Ken. Yeah, I mean, you know, most of what's being said, I was nodding along because I do agree. Maybe as the journalist in the group, I can bring in a little bit more skepticism on view what's been said about the base layer of digital technology maturing and e-commerce, payments, logistics being solved to some degree. I still think we have to note that this is basically solved for just a fragment of the Indonesian population, which are in the top tier cities, which are primarily located in Java. So that, you know, if you just need to be living in Bali or in Lombok, which isn't even far away from the center of what this is happening, and you'll realize that, you know, e-commerce becomes quite impractical because of the high logistics costs. So there are still sort of barriers to unlocking the next phase of growth. But yeah, what Francisco said, I think that the next phase is targeted around SMEs, the informal sector, and developing tools and services that serve them and coming into the digital economy. That's something that I see playing out in the next, you know, at least 5 years to decade. I think it's going to take a little bit more time for these businesses to yeah, just really see the value in that.
And I'd love to hear you expand a little bit more on those infrastructure and connectivity challenges. We know Indonesia is an archipelago of more than 17,000 islands. If you are playing in the tech space, what are some of the considerations there?
I mean, I think one of the big considerations is just connectivity in terms of data, you know, that people are, they will have access to a smartphone and mobile data, but not necessarily all the time, you know, so very data heavy apps or data consumptive behaviors like streaming, that's still sort of out of the question for some people who are going with a very limited sort of, you know, prepaid system on their smartphones, so that they're not as willing to, you know, watch high definition videos and so on. So that's always a consideration. And I think that's an opportunity for businesses that help companies reduce their sort of data footprints and that just make it more efficient to transfer data volumes. And I've seen a couple of startups, you know, like doing this kind of thing. And yeah, the other big challenge is logistics, where, you know, e-commerce becomes sort of unviable and will probably stay that way for a while because of Indonesia's archipelago nature. So, and what I've seen businesses do there in terms of addressing this is quite interesting, this concept of group buying and also like bulk buying, where logistics costs are, you know, basically reduced through the fact that people are teaming up to make these purchases. So we don't have like single products shipping from one side of the country to the other, but in a more sort of group buy fashion.
And I don't want to paint you as the negative person on this panel. I know you are very bullish on the Indonesian tech outlook, but I have to ask about I guess the global pressures on the tech sector. We've seen big sort of declines in value in the US tech sector in recent months. There's inflationary pressure that's coming through. How robust is the Indonesian tech ecosystem and those bigger unicorns? Can they weather the storm?
I mean, we can't really see into the distant future, right? If I'm talking about the next 2 years or so, I still think they can weather the storm. These businesses are ingrained in the population in a way that I feel is quite robust at this point. People aren't going to stop using them. And what we'll see, I think, will likely more affect a little bit the venture capital scene, where maybe startups that are raising now, that are just reaching unicorn status, are raising at flat or slightly down rounds. And that does have a ripple effect, but it doesn't mean that these companies are shutting down, from one year to the next. And I've seen a few of these cycles of sort of hype and cooling off. And it doesn't mean that the overall trends aren't still pointing upwards. It just may take a bit longer.
I mean, the mention there of venture capital, I would love to get your take on this question, Francisco. How are you seeing it?
Yeah, sure, Rob. What we're seeing is on the ground, and in terms of some of our own portfolio companies that are fundraising at the moment, is that we're not seeing the large multiples between investment rounds to be as big as what it used to be. I think that's the first thing that we'll say. The second thing that we'll say is that investors are also demanding tighter unit economics a lot quicker. So let's just say if you have a particular portfolio company, they're a B2C portfolio company where cash burn tends to be bigger, a lot bigger. Investors are demanding a clear pathway to profitability within, say, 3 to 4 years, as opposed to 6 to 7 years. We know for a fact, we've heard through the grapevine, there were several Indonesian, very well-known startups that were meant to list this year, but because of the concerns when in looking at Bukalapak and Grab especially, Property Guru as well to an extent, that haven't been as lackluster, that they've also been rethinking as to whether they should stay private longer. So I think it's a combination of, yes, inflationary pressures, but I also think it's a combination of the fact that we've seen what we call internally as the golden age of Indonesian tech over the last 10 years, which was essentially very low interest rates, a lot of dry powder, everyone wanting to allocate more to emerging markets, especially Southeast Asia, to, okay, these companies who are very cash burn heavy, we need a clearer pathway to profitability. And at the end of the day, I personally think it is very good for the ecosystem, for investors who have been investing in businesses who are very concerned about unit economics and knowing that the pendulum will swing back to what we call conventional value investing. I think it's good for those businesses. And it's also good in the sense that it puts the pendulum back to business fundamentals, as opposed to founders trying to just, this is the skeptical part of me, founders trying to grow businesses without any clear pathway to profitability and only aiming for top line revenue or GMV.
Great, thanks for that analysis, Francisco. I really appreciate it. I would remind participants, please do add your questions in the Q&A. Would love to put some of those to our panelists. Now, Emma, you've been waiting very patiently. I'm sorry to keep you waiting this long, because I think your story is fascinating. You're the CEO and founder of a digital marketing analytics platform, Digivizer, and you are doing business in Indonesia. I believe you've even got some of your team there. And you're very accomplished in this sector. So I'd love you to tell us a bit about your offering and how you came to be doing business in Indonesia and the business model that you've put into place.
Sure. So I think, I mean, the first thing is we offer that insights platform as SaaS. So it enables tech to be built and largely, marketed, or services wrapped around that can be served from our headquarters in Sydney. But it's global in terms of its reach, right? It's anyone using any social platform that we cover. So all the major social platforms like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn, YouTube, certainly all the major platforms. And there's over 180 million users of social media, very mobile first, which was touched on, I think, both by Yonathan and Francisco. But we've used those insights to learn a lot about the Indonesian market and then help brands access that digital first population and learning about what they care about, what they're engaging with, what they're clicking on, what they're buying. And so we've helped a lot of global brands understand Indonesia. We've helped Australian companies understand and be able to market into Indonesia. And then I think to do that successfully, just closing off the business model, we've then placed a local team. That means relationships locally are able to be developed. So that's opened up partnerships and customer support of those that have local offices or local companies. So that gives that localization, which is obviously much greater than people who think going global is just a translation service. It's not. It's understanding a local market. It's building those relationships. It's understanding what those nuances are. But we're sitting on that amazing amount of data to be able to turn into the most cost-effective return in terms of anyone trying to reach, engage, sell or serve that particular marketplace.
And take us through, I guess, the journey for entering the Indonesian market. What your entry strategy was originally, maybe how it's evolved, and any things you know now that you wish you'd known back then.
I mean, I think so Digivizer is 11 years old, but prior to that, I was working in a global technology company. I was President Chief Operating Officer of Altium, so electronics design. I think my awareness pretty early in founding Digivizer is Australia has 0.33% of the global population. So my view was never that the market would be here in Australia. Like, I'm Australian, I wanted to raise my family here. It made sense for me to want to start the company here, but my viewpoint was global, and with the majority of the world and spectacular growth happening in Asia, that was just such an exciting market. And I realized very quickly that it would be an advantage for business to understand that Asia isn't one entity. It's like a series of countries with these very local nuances and cultures. So the more that you look to understand them, so being present, so to answer your question, personalizing your experience. So I looked and traveled a lot. There was the more developed Asian cities and countries, but then there were these incredible countries like Indonesia that were growing at such a rapid rate, with the difference, I think, in Indonesia first highlighting that brands were not owned with any bricks and mortar mindset of the consumer. There was very little kind of physical branding, which was very true, say, of the US and Australia, where our first experience with digital with brands was that we might have known them first as bricks and mortar. And so that digital first, mobile first, with a population who really does engage and spend a lot of hours on their mobile phone, it became such a fantastic medium. And then because of the size and nature and the maturity and different scale of growth that was happening, there's a market for everyone. So we found, technology certainly is a sector that's done very well. Education is another. Travel, there's been a whole bunch of, I guess, industries that's done better in Indonesia and earlier in Indonesia, but actually we're finding that it's almost relevant to anyway. It's just, what is that investment return? And because it's so measurable and it's actually incredibly affordable, like if you look at cost per customer acquisition or cost per anything in digital, Australia is like the second most expensive country in the world, Indonesia is so cheap by comparison because of the sheer population and income and everything else that's there, and because it is considered an emerging country. So it creates these opportunities, but it also requires, I think, expertise. So we partner, I guess, with brands to help them understand those opportunities, but it's all measurable. So it's not my opinion, it's not my personal experience, even though that helped me build a company. It's like, how is data actually informing this digital footprint, and what's returning best outcome that becomes those opportunities for our customers that we work for.
And take us through the, I guess, the mechanics of your operations in Indonesia. So you've got a team on the ground. How big is it? How does that function, and how does it fit into the global team?
So we're headquartered in Sydney, but then our second largest quarters is in Singapore. And so Indonesia has a small team, but they're connected as part of the Asia team. And so we actually scale up and down because we look more at, we're one global company. There's the localized team that builds those relationships directly with those customers and can certainly, 100% suit the time zone, but they're also able to lean on and collaborate with others across those other Asian countries that are also providing that same combination of front-facing local knowledge or relationships, but then they have a global function and able to be supported with the global resources. I would say, a lot of the success has come from having that local knowledge and that local front facing, but then being a champion of the culture and what's required so that everyone educates themselves around what those opportunities are and those nuances. So other than time zone, which is probably the only thing that we need to factor in, our view is where we to be global, it's actually a culture that you develop where it's very much understanding and creating equity of voice and equity of service in terms of the way centralized functions are able to support these different opportunities. So education is a key part of educating the whole team to be successful, say in Indonesia. So yes, we want that local knowledge and local relationships and time zone, but we actually want that knowledge to be brought back so everyone at Digivizer has an understanding of that opportunity and when they're serving. So for instance, a lot of the paid media is driven from our Sydney team. We've got a large digital performance team here. Some of them are now experts in each of those different countries, but it's a real team collaboration from the local Indonesian team and our team here in Sydney to learn. And so therefore, when the next customer comes in, there's a lot of insights that we're able to already know and lean in, and expertise, because we've got such a good understanding of what happens in industries or offers or different audiences within those countries.
And now, Emma, I have to ask you about an offering, your launch of Go-To Game a few years ago, which has been really successful. You partnered with Facebook Gaming and a bunch of influencers. Indonesia is obviously a big market for gaming and esports, and Francisco talked a little bit about it before. How are you seeing the Indonesian gaming and esports market, and tell us about this offering that you have in the area?
Yeah, so Go-To Game is backed by Digivizer and Digivizer's technology, but it was really born out of seeing this massive growth in gaming and the fact that didn't matter who, like we were working for Lenovo and Intel at the time and Microsoft in gaming in Asia, these audiences of participation in terms of actually being interested in both different types of games, particularly they were able to play in their mobile phone, but also esports team followings. And so you would see, you could pay to reach these audiences at a certain cost, or just organically, if you created the right activation and you were either backing the right team or you're engaging the right gamer, like influencer. So in gaming, it's really a gamer or a creator. They're amazing at live entertainment, those that are bringing in these huge audiences, because that's what people do. They watch these people game and talk through their experiences, their gaming. That these audiences were just so massive, but there was this ability to influence their audiences through this live kind of conversation that was happening, you know, with their cameras set up to also show them with their branded, you know, t-shirts and drink bottles and cameras and talking about what they purchased or eaten that day. And so it became this, you know, incredible opportunity, which is why Go to Games, you know, is a real industry play, only supporting brands who want to understand gamers, but we're also the champion of those gamers. So Indonesia is, you know, it's the largest gaming market in Southeast Asia. It's growing. So if you think of, you know, if 180 million are in social, like 116 million of them are gaming and 114 million of them are on mobile phones, just to give you a sense of how big that gaming market is. And again, I always reflect, since this is New South Wales, you know, Asialink base is like, you know, you think of our population relative to this audience that is just engaging, and, you know, they average 8.45 hours a day gaming. So it creates these very sticky, predictable, I guess, behaviors. And so again, it comes down to what is the type of content that will work with these audiences. So we know there's a desire for entertaining, you know, animation, you know, video, as long as, to Nadine's point, it's not too heavy in terms of the streaming requirements, but there's a lot of, you know, great content or ads that are able to be created that creates that engagement and with that audience. Plus you have that live creator ability to be able to engage them to talk directly to those audiences.
I'd love to bring Francisco in here. You know, are you following the esports and gaming market, and what's the outlook? You know, presumably there'll be, you know, with improvements in connectivity and digital infrastructure, you know, there should be a pretty good outlook. What's your view, Francisco?
Yeah, sure. So I think we talk about gaming a lot. I think what will be the next stage of gaming, which is what we're seeing all around the world slowly, and in Australia as well, and it's quite logical. You probably know what I'm going to say, and that's NFT games or crypto games. So essentially, the first evolution of games is where you had just normal games on a normal desktop connection. And then we moved on to mobile gaming, and within mobile gaming, we had microtransactions. So essentially the game, the first set of games you would buy once off. The second set of games, it's essentially where the gaming developer, they can either make money through the game itself, so selling the game as a subscription or as a once-off payment. And then what they then introduced was microtransactions. So let's just say you had a game and then you could buy skins or you could buy weapons. Then the game would, and they would have in-game currency, which that you can use, which you can top up using a credit card. Now, the third, what we call internally as the third evolution of gaming, is because of the blockchain technology, which has then allowed the creation of cryptocurrency, which has then allowed the creation for NFTs. We're seeing this third evolution of gaming. So again, like I said, think Axie Infinity, think about some of the games that Immutable are creating out of Australia. So that's where we see gaming, because essentially it's gaming where players can own their own assets. So they can own weapons, they can own characters. Those can be traded or those can be leveled up, and then they can earn in-game cryptocurrency, as well as the cryptocurrency itself. So it allows then for that cryptocurrency to off-ramp into fiat currency. It allows gamers to have a voice as well if there's governance tokens within the game. So certain components of the game, players can get together. And then there's also the investors, both speculative and professional, that can speculate on the actual value of the in-game cryptocurrency and the governance token itself. So that's where we see gaming. So for example, some games are coming out of Southeast Asia. They're recruiting people from central banks to be the economists within the game, because when you have cryptocurrency within a game, then you need to think about issues of supply and demand, tokenomics. So these kind of traditional economists are actually now being employed by gaming developers to think about the supply, demand and supply issues within gaming. So that's where we see gaming. And it's definitely something very big in Southeast Asia, particularly Vietnam, the Philippines and Indonesia, and something that we've seen, again, since the pandemic. So that's where we see it.
Thank you for that very clear explanation. I'm embarrassed to say that I'm not a gamer, so the world is a bit foreign to me, but thank you for making it so clear and simple for us. I want to stay with you, Francisco, and maybe bring Nadine in as well, but really interested in the crypto space. You talked about the sheer volumes, which are really impressive. But what's the regulatory environment like? It's obviously, you know, an emerging technology. And is it, you know, dominated by domestic players, or is there space for foreign players as well?
Yeah, sure. So I guess you asked two questions there, Rob. So first one is on regulation, which is what everyone asks. And the second one is international versus domestic. So in terms of regulation, it's always a fact we see in Web 2 as well as Web 3, and it's always that the law always lags behind the technology, or put in the inverse, technology leads the law. That means is that there's several people have different views on it. Some people view that because something is unregulated, you have an arbitrage opportunity there, to use some finance jargon. Or two, if you want the most optimal or the most fair outcome, then it means that the players, in this case, the founders of these particular startups, they should work in consultation with government. We've seen the latter approach, but we've also seen the former approach. So, for example, NFTs, we see a lot of, and this is not just Indonesia, but everywhere around the world, pump and dump schemes. So people creating an NFT collectible and then doing rug pulls for essentially, once an NFT has been dropped, people are then, they essentially run away with the cash. It's very unfortunate that we're seeing this, and it will only take time because regulators around the world, they still don't know how to classify NFTs, because it's not a security, putting on my lawyer's hat on, it's not necessarily a security, and it's not necessarily, you can argue it's not necessarily a financial product as well. So they're still trying to get around that. In terms of your question about domestic versus international, we're seeing both approaches. So we're seeing very domestic centric crypto startups playing out. They understand the market. They might have a Discord channel already with, say, 5,000 players or 5,000 people. So they've got that community build. But we're also seeing the likes of Binance also going to Indonesia via Toko Crypto. So they're an investor in Toko Crypto, but they've also, you're seeing other global players going to Indonesia. I think the ones who will really win in Indonesia in the crypto space are the ones who are able to embed Indonesia's nuances when it comes to tech into their particular product. So I'll give you a good example. So let's just say you're a gaming guild or you're a cryptocurrency exchange. If you make it really easy for Indonesian investors or players to off-ramp their cryptocurrency into Pulsa or just into Indonesian rupiah, or to add it to have your cryptocurrency off-ramped into your OVO wallet, I think they're the ones that will be more sticky because they've essentially adapted their product to Indonesia. Global players, they'll probably eventually come to that, but it will be, at the end of the day, it will be a question for them, just like any other global player in tech. Should we build or should we acquire? And I think we'll see more of the latter because of the fact that Indonesia has these developed ecosystems, that it would make it easier for a local player to build that up and then partner or get acquired by a foreign player.
There's a couple more topics that I'd like to pick up with the panel, particularly skills and then cyber. So starting with skills, maybe starting with you, Nadine, you know, what is the current situation in terms of digital skills in Indonesia, and where might there be opportunities?
I mean, it's definitely like the number one limit to growth that I hear all the time speaking to startup founders, you know, difficulties to hire, difficulties finding the right talent. And that's not only technical talent, but also talent in terms of product design, you know, user experience design, where some of these companies have just grown so fast and having had to recruit like hundreds of people at times, that the supply from coming out of Indonesian universities just isn't really able to keep up. And a lot of these companies have resorted to building like in-house academies, you know, trying to create these curriculums within if they've reached a certain stage. But it means for younger startups who don't have those resources, it's been really difficult. And because of that shortage, also prices have become quite high, like salaries for top tier talent has become quite high. So there's, and at the same time, it's still not easy for Asian companies to hire foreigners to come and live and work from Indonesia. There's always a lot of bureaucracy attached to that. So it's definitely like a very sort of shortage situation where I think you've seen that the bigger startups again have had to resort to working with overseas tech talents, whether that's in India or in Vietnam sometimes, or in Australia even, you know, Bukalapak, one of the bigger e-commerce platforms here, recently opened a tech hub in Australia. So yeah, you know, those are some of the sort of hacks that Indonesian companies have had to come up with.
And Emma, on a practical level, what's your experience been around the skills and gaps and opportunities that you've seen?
I mean, no luck with software developers, but that shortage is everywhere. But certainly from the digital marketing, it's what you're prepared to pay. So what we've done is hired some very experienced talent, you know, strong, may have studied overseas and worked overseas, but are native Indonesians to sort of lead the teams. And then we've put training in underneath that. So, you know, allowing them to develop their networks who they've hired next. But then the training is not local. The training's delivered, you know, as part of the same global training program, and then that's ongoing, and we do a lot of people development. I think the hardest thing is then making sure that they stay engaged, and so far we've had very little attrition, so please don't hear that and tap our team on the shoulders. But like, we've really worked to continue to show, like, here are the global opportunities, here is extra, you know, responsibility, and obviously within that, and the pathway to earn more. And then that sets a point of differentiation, because that exposure and our ability to be able to do that is greater than if it was just a straight local, you know, market we were serving only, potentially within that.
I see your hand, Yonathan. I was going to bring you in because it sounds like there's some real opportunities here. What are your views? Yeah,
thank you, Rob. I think before I come to the actual, I got a question for Emma. If I could, just would like to ask your experience when you are establishing your Indonesian presence. What kind of model do you use? Do your Indonesian team work in a physical office, or they just work remotely? And second question is, do you encounter any regulatory difficulties, any barrier that you have to sort of sort out before you manage to grow your market in Indonesia?
Let's do those questions with you first, Emma. Let's go to you first, Emma, and then we'll come back to you, Yonathan, on the skills question. So Emma, over to you.
Okay, so in terms of how we've dealt with local employment laws, we do that through a third party. So they are actually contracted through that third party, but are Digivizer employees managed by Digivizer. So that deals with that. We've had to sort out a local payment system within that, so just that we could predict and ensure that money arrives on time, and so there's a reliable, you know, salary payment date. They're not hard to work out. It's more like, who are your partners that you need to partner to do that. And I'm happy to share how we do it, but that came a little bit through leveraging people that I knew were working in those markets, and then looking at learning from them and who they were using, and then selecting. And we've changed once within that, but I'm really happy with how we have that solved. Sorry, your second question, there was two parts to that. One was then the local team and how we work. We're actually working like majority remote, our whole organization. So that's 60 plus employees globally anyhow. But then we organize in office, just in collaborative workspace days, to get the team together. And we do that both at the local country level, and then we do it at the region level, And then prior to COVID, we did it at, we do it at a much larger team, and fly everyone. In fact, the last time we flew everyone in was to Indonesia. So that's where we kind of held the group get together. Face-to-face, I think, is important though for making them feel connected, not just entirely remote. So you've just got to get that balance in terms of the travel you're prepared to do, and then the travel that you're allowing them to do, and then how you're cross-collaborating your employees across regions. So again, they're learning, seeing different, how different countries or implementations are working, but it's really about building that sense of belonging to a company that has a set culture. It's the same no matter where they work from. And I think, like in today's day, and because COVID forced us to, I think companies who don't know how to engage teams to work super effectively remotely, like they won't be able to hire or retain staff moving forward. Like there are ways to do that really effectively. And I think, there's lots of tips and tricks we use to do that. And we're constantly surveying our employees around the world to make sure that that works. And we try new initiatives, and we're very culturally sensitive in what those initiatives are. Lots of cross-country teams as well, in terms of not, so that they learn, they're not just operating within their own country, to get that upskilling awareness and sense of belonging, I guess.
That's fantastic, Emma. Great to hear some of the real practicalities around how to run an integrated cross-border business like that. It's fantastic. Yonathan, keen to just get your view on the opportunity around skills, and maybe any sort of closing thoughts, and then we'll go around the panel.
Yep, of course. In terms of skills, we are seeing quite a number of Indonesian education institutions being established and growing quickly to address this. So they are more of a I wouldn't say informal. They are outside the normal education pathway of universities and perhaps vocational school. They are more on, they're running courses in terms of coding, digital marketing, etc. And also they are also looking at international certification. So working with international education institution, universities. We are helping one of the Indonesian fast growing education institution to work with Australian New South Wales institutions as well. To the stage that they would like to establish some kind of presence in Sydney or in New South Wales. So there's an interest to connect this, and because the demand is there, but also they would like to have, the students would like to have more than just the skills. They would like to also have the certification, sort of the mark on the certificates to give them some kind of credibility and to get hired quickly. And on that space as well, there are lots of financing solutions coming in. So we are seeing a lot of probably pay later and also online sort of loan being enrolled. So quite a dynamic area here that are some Indonesian companies are trying to fill in the gap to establish that. So we are looking at, the students could range from all the way to high school students up to universities up to professionals to answer that gap, and for some of them actually to pivot their career towards the areas Nadine mentioned, because of the shortage of supply and the pay is quite high on that sector. The few last remarks from me is, this is a market that you will need to invest your time and effort, of course, and we are here to help you. Investment New South Wales, myself, together with our stakeholders here, and we are excited to help you and to help you to navigate the market and to understand better. Of course, our Going Global is especially designed to help you to do that. It will be launched in July, August, so watch this space, and looking forward to have you there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Yonathan. Francisco, any closing thoughts or advice from you?
Yeah, no, probably just echoing what Yonathan said in terms of, Indonesia is a very interesting market. It's the closest Asian country from Australia. A lot of people forget that. It's very big, fourth largest country by population. both has a very thriving SME market as well as a B2C market, tech sector, traditional industry. And it's really good to see, I've been in Australia, Indonesia space for quite a while now, and it's really good to see a lot more events being held about Indonesia. Obviously, during the mining boom, we saw a lot of events from other Asian countries, but it's really good to see a lot more events from Indonesia. I think my final remark is, I'm going to echo actually something that you said, Rob. If anyone wants to learn a bit more about Indonesia, I would definitely recommend people subscribe to the Again, and especially follow Nadine. So Nadine is, I've actually followed Nadine for, even went back in the Tech in Asia days, and I must say she's probably the best journalist when it comes to tech news in Indonesia, in the entire country, if not the entire region. Very quality writing, very quality thought leadership. We talk about Nadine's thought leadership posts a lot actually internally, so I definitely recommend people to read all the stuff that she writes about Indonesia if you want to know a bit more about the market.
Fantastic. And now that we've put the spotlight on you, Nadine, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, right. No pressure, right? Yeah, thanks. That's really sweet to hear. Closing thoughts. Yeah, I think Indonesia can be a bit challenging to break into when you're coming from the outside. You know, the business landscape does tend to be sort of a bit cliquish. You know, there's a lot of strong conglomerates that are dominant here, and that seeps into how the digital ecosystem works as well. And I think the key to Indonesia is definitely like always collaboration. You know, take your time to build relationships, consider partnerships, joint ventures, those things, I would say. You know, I think I liked Emma's point about, you know, putting Indonesians into leadership positions and giving them the power to build their own teams and own skills. I think that's something that's highly regarded here in Indonesia. And when I see founders from overseas succeeding, that it's often not necessarily companies that are targeting Indonesian consumers directly, but more in the, you know, Saas business models that are more B2B, that are more technical, because that's really like where Indonesia has lots of gaps to plug. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Emma, final advice from you for any New South Wales businesses that might be thinking about Indonesia?
I mean, I just encourage them to test, right? Like it's a very digital first, mobile first, social, active country of which you can test whether this, you know, what message, what audience, what offering is going to work for you. But I think the more you look to learn about Indonesia and those opportunities, the greater you'll see what's actually there for us. And it's not as expensive as what you may think. But I think always personalize your time. If you want to win in a country, then you've got to visit it, you've got to understand it, you've got to learn, you know, read about it. But you know, like there's just so many opportunities, and I think that's probably been like our revenues are 60% earned overseas. You know, and it was the same thing, was able to flip Altium from 100% Australian, you know, to 97% overseas revenues. And it's like you've got to treat each country as an opportunity, learn as much as you can about it, but like, you know, and then test. But don't discount the power of having a local partner or a local person to help you really, you know, navigate the industry that you're trying to crack.
That is fantastic advice to end on. I want to extend my sincere appreciation to our wonderful speakers today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. It's been great to have people of your caliber on this session. I do also want to extend appreciation to Investment New South Wales, which is very committed to the Indonesia market. Please do get in touch with them if you think they might be able to support you. If you have time, we do have a small survey at the end. But with that, let me close the session and thank everybody for participating.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rob.